Have you ever just stopped and wondered why we live in countries? I mean, why do we have governments and police and taxes and all these rules made by people we'll probably never meet? It feels totally normal, but when you think about it, how did all this even start? It's a huge question, one of the great puzzles of human history.
Seriously, think about what a massive jump this was for us as a species. For most of our history, we were in small, wandering groups. Then suddenly, we're building these giant, complex societies with leaders and borders. What happened? What made people trade in their total freedom for structure and authority? That's the puzzle we're going to try and piece together today.
And trust me, we are not the first ones to puzzle over this. For literally thousands of years, some of the smartest people in history have been wrestling with this exact same problem. And no surprise, they didn't all land on the same answer. They came up with some really fascinating and totally different explanations for how the state came to be. So here's what we've got on tap. We're going to start with the puzzle itself. Then we'll walk through 4 major answers that people have come up with over the centuries. First up, the idea of a divine plan. Then rule by force. After that, a grand bargain. And finally, the theory of natural growth. All right, let's dive right in. The central mystery: where in the world did the state actually come from? It's the entire framework for how billions of us live, but its beginnings, well, that's where the debate really heats up.
So our first answer, it's the oldest one on the books, and it is definitely the most supernatural. This is the divine right theory, and it basically says the state wasn't even a human idea to begin with.
The idea here is pretty straightforward. God, or the gods, looked down, created the state, and then handpicked a specific person or family to be in charge. The king wasn't just some political guy. He was God's manager here on Earth. And you can probably guess what that means for everybody else, right? If the king is chosen by God, who are you to argue with him? He answers to God, not to you. Rebelling against the king isn't just illegal, it's a sin. And of course, power gets passed from father to son, because that divine seal of approval is in their bloodline. Just think about the ancient Egyptian pharaohs or the kings of medieval Europe. This was their ultimate justification for absolute power.
Okay, let's move on to answer number 2. This one leaves all the divine stuff behind and gets its hands dirty right here on Earth. This is the force theory, and yeah, it's a much more brutal explanation for how things got started.
According to this theory, the state is basically a product of warfare. Simple as that. The first king wasn't chosen by God. He was the toughest warrior around, the one who beat all his neighbors into submission and forced them to follow his rules. It's the pure, raw logic of might makes right. So the key thing to get here is that this kind of state is born from violence. The first government wasn't formed with a handshake. It was formed at the point of a sword. People don't agree to be ruled. They're forced to be ruled. It's kind of like survival of the fittest, but for politics. The state is the trophy you get for winning the fight. But hold on, what if the state wasn't forced on us from above by God or from the outside by a warlord? What if it actually came from us? This brings us to a really game-changing idea, our third answer, the social contract theory. Now, this theory says that the state is a product of our own reason, that at some point, people living in a chaotic state of nature just got tired of it and realized, hey, life would be way better if we had some rules and protection. So they decided to make a deal, a kind of grand bargain. They voluntarily agreed to give up some of their absolute do-whatever-you-want freedom in exchange for the security and order of a society. But here's where it gets interesting. Not everyone agreed on the fine print of this contract. On one side, you have a philosopher named Thomas Hobbes. He imagined that state of nature as pure chaos, where life was, in his famous words, nasty, brutish, and short. For him, people would do anything to escape that chaos, so they'd happily trade their liberty for a powerful ruler who could guarantee their safety. But then you have John Locke, who saw it differently. He believed we have natural rights, like life, liberty, and property, before any government exists. And for him, we form a state not to escape a nightmare, but to better protect the rights we already have. Okay, time for our last answer, and this one takes a totally different tack. It says the state wasn't created in some big dramatic moment, not by God, not by a battle, and not by a contract. Instead, it just grew. This is the evolutionary theory. So this theory sees the state as just a natural extension of the most basic human group there is, the family. It wasn't invented at all. It evolved super slowly over a very, very long time. There wasn't one single event, but a gradual process of social development. And you can kind of see how that would work, right? It all starts with the family, the original unit of authority with the head of the household. Over time, related families might band together to form a clan led by a chief. Then, a bunch of clans might unite into a larger tribe. And eventually, that tribe might stop wandering, settle down, claim some land, and develop all the stuff we recognize as a state. Agriculture, laws, government. It's just a natural evolution from simple family ties to a complex political system.
So let's put this all together for a quick recap. This table lays it out perfectly. With divine right, power comes from God. Simple. With the force theory, power is taken through conquest. With the social contract, it's the total opposite. Power is given by the people. And finally, with the evolutionary theory, power just grows naturally out of family and tradition. 4 totally different starting points, 4 completely different reasons for having a ruler, all trying to crack the same big puzzle.
And that kind of leaves us with one last question to chew on. Are these just dusty old ideas from a history book? Or can we still see pieces of them in our world today? When a leader claims a special mandate from the people, is that a little echo of divine right? When countries use military power to get what they want, is that just the force theory playing out? And maybe most importantly, are our modern democracies actually living up to that grand bargain of the social contract? Something to think about.